Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and absolutely demystify one of the most versatile and honestly most resilient setups in all of chess. Look, whether you're facing a familiar foe or walking into completely unknown territory over the board, having a reliable system is your absolute best weapon. So today, we're exploring the King's Indian setup, a universal blueprint that can literally transform how you approach the entire opening phase of the game. Just imagine sitting down at the board, completely unbothered by what your opponent plays. They push a pawn, bring out a knight, maybe try some tricky gambits, and you just smile. Why? Because you have a universal blueprint ready to deploy. By mastering this single cohesive arrangement of pieces, you can play it from the white side, you can play it from the black side, and you can comfortably navigate your way right into a really powerful middle game. Here's our roadmap for today. First, the hyper-modern philosophy. Second, the universal core setup. Third, the King's Indian attack moves. Fourth, the King's Indian defense moves. And finally, the middle game attacking strategy. Section 1. The hyper-modern philosophy. Let's redefine central control. To really get the King's Indian, we first have to sort of unlearn traditional chess dogma. Instead of immediately rushing to occupy the center with our pawns, we're actually deliberately baiting our opponent. We're letting them build this massive imposing pawn center early on, and you might be wondering, why on earth would we do that? Well, because a massive center that isn't supported by developed pieces actually becomes a massive target. We let them overextend, and then we strike back.
Section 2. The Universal Core Setup. This is our foundational pattern.
This is the incredibly harmonious pattern that forms our universal blueprint. Picture this. The dark squared bishop is fianchettoed, which simply means it's developed onto the longest diagonal of the board right at g2, tucked safely behind that pawn on g3. The knights are developed gracefully, and the king is safely castled away from the center. This fortress right here, this is the visual anchor you're aiming for every single time. Section 3. The King's Indian attack. Let's look at how we pull this off from the white perspective. Since white moves first, you actually get an extra tempo, an extra turn to build your attack. Here's the step-by-step sequence. You start with 1 e4, then crucially, you play 2 d3. That pawn on d3 is an essential shield against any early attacks on your knight. You then develop the knights to d2 and f3, play g3, fianchetto that bishop to g2, and finally castle. Following this exact sequence is key, guys, because it ensures you don't accidentally trap your own bishop. The whole setup is just beautifully flexible. If you open 1 e4 and black goes for the French defense with 1 e6 and 2 d5, you simply play 3 nd2. This brilliantly sidesteps a premature queen exchange if they decide to capture on e4. Against the Sicilians 1 c5, you just continue your exact setup with 2 d3 and 3 g3. Or, if you want to bypass all of that, you can open with the universal 1 nf3, which effortlessly adapts to almost whatever your opponent tries to throw your way. Now, if you do start with nf3, black definitely has a few clever replies up their sleeve. They might try the Keras system, playing 1 d5, 2 c6, and bringing their bishop outside the pawn chain with bg4. They could play a reversed London with b5. Or, hey, they might even mimic you with a reversed King's Indian, playing c5, n6, and g6. But listen, regardless of the variation, your core mission remains exactly the same. Complete your setup, control the center from afar, and prep for the middle game. The real beauty of this system, your king reaches ultimate safety super early on. By castling kingside so quickly, you are securing a perfectly stable position. Long before you launch any massive pawn storms or tactical fireworks in the center, your king is tucked safely away in a bunker, heavily defended by your fianchetto bishop and a solid wall of pawns. Let's take a quick second to compare the two perspectives. Playing as white in the King's Indian attack, you use that extra tempo we talked about to establish a central bind, very often pushing your pawn from e4 to e5 to cramp black and carve out space for a kingside attack. But as black, in the King's Indian defense, you have to play a bit more reactively. You allow white to build up that massive center, and then you create this intense, asymmetrical tension by striking back with your own pawns to c5 or e5 to totally undermine their structure. Section 4. The King's Indian defense. Let's look at the black perspective. All right, let's officially flip the board and face a 1.d4 opening. The moves here are going to mirror white's strategy. You meet 1.d4 with 1.nf6 and 2.g6. You prep your fianchetto with bg7 and you castle. But pay close attention to the vital pawn move to d6. This is absolutely essential. It stops an early e4 push from chasing your knight away. Quick fun fact for you, if you play d6 early against 1.e4, you actually transpose straight into the Perk defense.
Finally, you challenge the center with either e5 or c5.
Because the King's Indian defense is so intensely studied, the Encyclopedia of Chess Openings, the ECO, literally dedicates 40 codes to it, from E60 all the way to E99. White has so many different ways to try and crack your setup. They might play the Samish variation, using an early F3 pawn to bolster the center. They could try the Averbach variation with 6b2 and an early c5 push, or you might find yourself in the classic, highly theoretical orthodox Mar del Plata main lines featuring a locked-up center. Just look at this huge wall of variations. Honestly, some of these main lines have been analyzed 30 moves deep. It can look completely intimidating. But here is the secret. Even with all these dense sidelines, your foundational task never changes. No matter what wild stuff White is doing, your goal is simply to complete your setup. Let them sweat over the theory while you quietly build your fortress.
Section 5, the climax. Let's get into the middle game attacking strategy.
Okay, both sides are fully set up. Now how do we actually go about winning the game? The absolute golden rule of the King's Indian is this: close the center first. You only push for a flank attack once those central pawns are locked tight and can't move past each other. Once the center is closed, you slide your knight backward, maybe to d7 or e1, to unblock your f-pawn. You literally never push this f-pawn while the center is open, where your king is going to get exposed. But with the closed center, you unleash it. You launch a terrifying, relentless pawn storm directly against your opponent's king.
This kind of structured, coiled patience, it leads to some of the most spectacular results in chess history. A brilliant example is a legendary game played by the late Grandmaster Edward Gufeld. He executed the King's Indian defense so flawlessly, unleashing his fan-shadowed bishop and pieces in such a devastating, incredibly artistic attack that he forever dubbed that game his Mona Lisa. And honestly, that is the ultimate potential of the blueprint you've just learned.
So, here's the big question for you to take to your very next game. Whether you're wielding the King's Indian attack as White, dictating the pace and cramping your opponent with an early central bind, or whether you're sitting patiently as Black, letting your opponent overextend their center before launching a Mona Lisa counterattack of your own, the King's Indian gives you the universal tools you need. The setup is yours. The question is, how are you going to use it on the board? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.